You're listening to Soap Dirt, the latest in television entertainment news.
Hey there, Young and the Restless fans. It is Soap Dirt on YouTube, and given the drama that Phyllis Summers is embroiled in right now, we decided to look back at her history and look back at the worst crimes she has ever committed. Her laundry list of crimes is pretty impressive. If you don't remember this about Phyllis, or you haven't been watching for that long, or you just forgot it, we are going to dig into her 5 worst crimes. The 5th, of course, is the one she's currently engaged in right now, but we've got her other 4 big ones from the past, and there's so much to unpack. If you've not already, click that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our Young and the Restless spoilers, news, and special features just like this one. So, Phyllis Summers. In 1994, way back in the day, she was in her 20s, she was an obsessed fan of rock star Danny Romalotti, and so she decided to drug and molest him. She drugged him up, got in his bed, and at that time, he was married to, but estranged from, Christine Williams. So Phyllis got pregnant, but it wasn't his child, it was someone else's, but she lied to trap him, and he divorced Christine and then married Phyllis. And the whole drugging and raping Danny leads into an associated crime, which is actually, I don't know how you equate these in terms of how big they are, but I'm just putting them all together. Her crime spree related to Danny. Phyllis was very worried about Christine's influence still in Danny's life, and so she decided to murder her. And she went to run her down in her car, only Paul Williams got her out of the way, and he was the one injured instead. And Phyllis drove away, and it was a very long time before she was caught for that. She never paid for the crime of drugging and molesting Danny Romalotti. And that hit and run she pulled on Christine and Paul stayed hidden for 18 years. In fact, so long that the statute of limitations ran out. And even though Cricket finally found out that she was the one who ran her down, they couldn't do anything about it. So that hit and run thing, and her never being held accountable for what she did in molesting Danny and then ruining Christine's marriage and then trying to kill Christine, that may be another reason that DA Christine is going to throw the book at Phyllis when the police finally get their hands on her for this current crime she's engaged in right now on Young and the Restless, her fake death scheme. All right, crime number 2. Let's dig in. This was 3 years later, but this crime relates back to the whole Danny thing as well. In 1997, Phyllis was basically implicated in the murder of a woman named Sasha Green. Sasha was another woman who worked at the DNA lab with Phyllis. That was Phyllis's job in her 20s. She was working at this DNA lab. That was when she did all the stuff to Danny and Cricket. So Sasha worked at that lab with Phyllis, and she helped Phyllis by altering paternity records for her so that she could keep Danny. And Phyllis had fixed Sasha up with some guy to keep her happy, but then that guy broke up with her. And so Sasha was upset, and she came back and demanded $30,000 from Phyllis to keep quiet. Phyllis said no, even though that was putting her marriage to Danny at risk. And then Sasha went to Christine and was asking her for money, like $50K. Phyllis finally caved and paid her. She had to borrow money from different people and do all this stuff. And then Sasha wrote up everything that Phyllis had done, from drugging and molesting him to just the crime with Cricket, all that. She wrote this up, this a little memoir transcript thing, and she was distributing them, and Phyllis was able to collect them all back up as far as she knew, but she was really worried that Sasha had sold one to a tabloid or had sent one to Christine. So Phyllis showed up to confront Sasha at her hotel room, and Phyllis slapped her and was terrorizing her and was making threats to her. And as Phyllis uttered that last threat, then she was still in the room with Sasha. Then the next thing we saw of Sasha was Sasha passed out on the bed and a fire in her hotel room. She perished from the fire. Phyllis had showed up to see Malcolm Winters and told him, "I can't believe what I just did." So she seemed to be confessing to killing her or drugging her and leaving her and starting the fire. It's not still clear now exactly what she did. Later, when the police talked to her, Phyllis claimed that Sasha was alive and well when she left. Even though all the signs pointed to foul play, Phyllis was never charged. And later, Sasha actually came back as a ghost to taunt Phyllis for letting her die. So it definitely looked like she killed her, but they never really followed up with that, and there were no charges filed, a crime she got away with. All right, we're going to skip ahead then a decade to 2007 for the next crime, and that was the blackmail of Brad Carlton. If you don't remember Brad, he was played by Don Diamond, who's over at Bold and the Beautiful now. And there was this whole thing where this was at a time when Nick and Sharon were married, and Nick was having an affair with Phyllis, as he tends to do. And their affair had split up Nick and Sharon, and then Sharon took comfort in Brad Carlton's arms, and Phyllis found out about it, and she was using that to blackmail Brad when he was running for a seat on the Newman Board of Directors. There's so much backstory. You know how soap plots are. They're like with tendrils everywhere. So Phyllis at that time was conspiring with Neil Winters and Victor Newman, and they needed this seat on the board. They needed Neil to win the seat so that they could push this plan through that they had all been secretly working on together. And Brad looks like he was poised to win it, and so she blackmailed Brad, and it worked initially. Neil Winters won the seat on the board just as Victor and Phyllis wanted, but Brad was furious afterwards, and he had Phyllis arrested for extortion. This was a case where she actually paid the piper. She was tried, found guilty, and sent to prison, but then her good lawyer buddy Michael Baldwin was able to pull some fast moves and got her out after just a few months. So the one time she actually paid, then she didn't pay the full consequences. All right, so this fourth crime we're going to talk about is very interesting because it was a crime she co-committed with others, and then she threw her co-criminals under the bus. This was just a few years ago. This was back in 2019. This relates to the death, I'm holding up my fingers in quotation marks, the death of J.T. Hellstrom. Of course, we know he's not dead, but back then we thought he was. So this was a crime that Phyllis took part in, and it came back around to bite her, and she did everything she could to avoid accountability so she didn't have to spend another day in prison. Her behavior during this incident is very germane to the last crime we're going to talk about, which is her faking her death. So JT had come back. He was dating Victoria, and he was really abusive. A lot of people are still upset about this plot. British soap director Mal Young had taken the reins at Y&R and was just going hog wild. He was writing out legacy characters. He was ruining other characters. It was really awful. And he wrote this kind of garbage plot where he maligned J.T. Hellstrom, who had never, been some sort of bad guy, but he came back and he made him this abuser. And then later they blamed it on a brain tumor and cleared it up. But in that time period, Mal Young had just wrecked JT's character. It really, really stank. So Victoria had dumped JT. She hadn't told the ladies yet that he had been abusing her, but she dumped him, and the ladies were over at her house having a breakup party. It was Sharon, Phyllis, Nikki, and Victoria. Mariah was there, but then she conked out and she missed all this stuff. But JT showed up in a fit of rage. Victoria finally told them that he had been abusing her, and Nikki whacked him in the head with a fireplace poker to save Victoria, and he, quote, died. So they rolled him up in a rug and buried him in Chancellor Park, which had been kind of dug up for some construction stuff. So Phyllis told everyone that she threw the murder weapon in the lake, the fireplace poker, and she left JT's cell phone in a dumpster near the airport. Initially, the police thought that he ran away to avoid trouble for abusing her. So then somebody started blackmailing Sharon, Nikki, Victoria, and Phyllis. Nikki ended up paying $250,000, and they were in a panic. They dug up where they buried him. They found it was empty. And then at some point, Ray Rosales found JT's watch, and what was a missing persons investigation turned into a murder investigation. JT was back and secretly tormenting all of them, and this was behind the scenes though, and the ladies were all arrested. Victoria was charged. Well, initially Victor was charged, but then Nikki came forward and she confessed, and then Sharon told Ray the whole truth about everybody who had been there. She basically blabbed the truth about all of them. So then Victoria, Nikki, Sharon, and Phyllis were all charged, but Phyllis immediately flipped on the other three. She turned state's evidence. She kept trying to say that she was really going to help them, but she was helping herself. And the other three were all convicted and sent to prison. However, they were released after JT showed his cruel face again, and they knew that he was alive and they couldn't have killed him. They faced a little bit of time for like obstruction of justice kind of stuff. But Phyllis showed what she was willing to do. And just real quick, if you didn't know the breadth of her criminal experience, if you didn't know Phyllis's criminal history, I'm going to run through 16 big crimes. I'm going to do it rapid fire real quick so you understand we touched the tip of the iceberg with these crimes we found. There's the drug and rape of Danny Romalotti. There is her faking paternity test. There's her hit and run attempted murder. There's her blackmailing her shrink, breaking and entering Cricket and Paul's honeymoon hotel room. She was paying off Sasha's blackmail. She was a murder suspect in Sasha's death. She drugged Daniel Romalotti's biological father to steal blood for another paternity test she was faking. She falsified the paternity test, and when it was revealed, she lost custody. She had Michael Baldwin kidnapped and held captive. She blackmailed Brad and Sharon. She pulled a B&E on Sharon's room and cut up a bunch of her clothes. She was arrested, but those charges were dropped. She stole photos to publish without permission. She was arrested. Charges were dropped again. She moved somebody else's dead body. She was charged in JT's murder and cover-up, and then she hacked into Nick's company, remember Dark Horse? She hacked into Dark Horse servers for Adam. So if you look at her crime summary, it is lengthy. All right, now we're going to talk about the very last crime, the one she's embroiled in now. If you've not already, please reach down, click that subscribe button so you don't miss Young and the Restless spoilers, casting news, and fun videos like this to keep you current on everything happening. All right, now in 2023, we've got Phyllis Summers set to be charged for all the deeds around faking her death. If you didn't know it yourself, and unless Y&R is going to try and create laws, it is actually not against the law in any state to fake your death. It is illegal to fake your death for fraudulent reasons, like if you're trying to not pay your student loans, your credit card bills, if you are trying to avoid the IRS. So things like that, like the motives for why you did it. But if you just feel like faking your death, well, okay, that's not in itself a crime. But she was engaged in this case, obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, manufacture of evidence, witness tampering, bribery. And then there's that whole Jeremy Stark death, which of course we know was self-defense, but because she didn't report it at the time, it is not going to come out looking good. They can make it manslaughter, they could make it murder 2, they could even make it premeditated murder 1, because there's no evidence to contradict that. It just depends on what they want to charge her with. So based on Phyllis's lengthy criminal history, what we've seen is that she has committed a fair number of crimes, fewer in recent years than she did when she first came on to Young and the Restless, but she rarely is held accountable and she rarely pays. And just like with the JT situation where she turned state's evidence, I imagine that Phyllis is going to try and pull something like this. She is going to try and offload all the blame for what she did onto Jeremy Stark because he is dead and he cannot defend himself. So big whoop, right? Do you think it'll work? Share in your comments. Do you remember these crimes that Phyllis did? What do you think about it? Which one of Phyllis's crimes do you think is the most heinous? Share your thoughts in the comments below.
Thank you for being a loyal listener. Follow us wherever you get your podcast, because you don't want to miss the next episode. Soap Dirt is on all the major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and more.